I thought I was surprising my son. I had no idea I was the one about to be surprised. I was 68 years old when I booked a last-minute flight to Texas. It wasn't something I normally did. For most of my life, I planned everything carefully, especially after my husband Robert passed away 5 years earlier. But that Tuesday morning, sitting alone at my kitchen table in Ohio with a cup of coffee growing cold beside me, I suddenly missed my son more than usual. Jason and I used to talk every Sunday. Lately, those calls had become shorter, more rushed. He always seemed busy. There was always a meeting, an errand, or some reason he had to go. I told myself that was normal. He was 38. He had a wife, a career, and his own life. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. So I decided to do something spontaneous. I baked his favorite apple pie before sunrise, packed a small suitcase, and bought a plane ticket for that afternoon. I imagined the look on his face when he opened the door. I could almost hear him laughing and saying, "Mom, you should have told me you were coming." I smiled the entire flight. The woman sitting beside me asked if I was visiting family. I proudly told her I was surprising my son. She smiled and said he was lucky. At the time, I believed that too. The Texas air felt warmer than I expected when I stepped outside the airport. The rideshare driver chatted about football and traffic while I stared out the window, watching neighborhoods pass by. Palm trees, brick houses, wide streets. Everything looked bright and welcoming. By the time we pulled into Jason's subdivision, the sun was beginning to lower in the sky. I paid the driver, grabbed my suitcase, and carefully carried the pie to the front porch. Then I stopped. There was a sign hanging from the front door. White cardboard, black marker. For simple words. Honeymoon. Do not disturb. I stared at it for several seconds, convinced I was misunderstanding something. Honeymoon. Jason and Amber had been married for nearly 8 years. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe they were taking a vacation and trying to keep salespeople away. I set the pie down and knocked anyway. No answer. I knocked again. Nothing. I tried Jason's phone. Straight to voicemail. I called Amber. The same result. The neighborhood felt strangely quiet. A light breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower hummed. I stood there holding my phone, feeling foolish. Then I noticed something else. Tucked beneath the welcome mat was a cream-colored envelope. At first I assumed it was junk mail that had slipped out. But when I bent down, I realized it wasn't addressed to Jason or Amber. It had no stamp, no return address, just a name written neatly across the front in blue ink. Eleanor Whitmore. I had never heard that name before in my life. Slowly, I picked up the envelope and turned it over. It was sealed. Whoever left it had clearly intended for someone to find it. My first instinct was to put it back. It wasn't mine. But something about that moment felt wrong. The empty house, the unanswered calls, the honeymoon sign, and now this mysterious envelope. A feeling settled in my chest, cold and uncomfortable. The kind of feeling you get when a puzzle piece suddenly appears, but you don't yet know what picture it belongs to. I looked down the quiet street. I looked back at the envelope. Then I slipped it carefully into my purse. Because for the first time since arriving in Texas, I wasn't thinking about surprising my son anymore. I was starting to wonder what everyone else already seemed to know. I stood on that porch for another minute, listening to the silence. The pie was getting warm in the Texas heat, and my suitcase suddenly felt heavier than it had at the airport. I glanced again at the envelope in my purse. Eleanor Whitmore. The name meant nothing to me, yet I could not stop thinking about it. Finally, I picked up my things and walked back down the driveway. There was a small hotel less than 3 miles away, and 20 minutes later, I was sitting alone in a modest room overlooking the parking lot. The air conditioner hummed softly. The television was off. Everything felt strangely unreal. I placed the pie on the small desk near the window and sat on the edge of the bed. Then I pulled out the envelope. For several minutes I simply stared at it. My parents had raised me to respect other people's privacy. Opening mail that did not belong to me felt wrong. But another thought kept pushing its way into my mind. If Jason and Amber had truly gone on vacation, why had nobody mentioned it? Why had every call gone unanswered? And why did a sealed envelope with an unfamiliar name seem to be hidden beneath their welcome mat? Eventually, curiosity won. I carefully opened the flap. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. The message was short, much shorter than I expected. Eleanor, everything is ready. The transfer will be completed once the property issue is resolved. Do not contact us at the house. Amber knows the schedule. That was all. No signature. No company letterhead. Nothing else. I read it 3 times. Then a fourth. Property issue. Amber knows the schedule. I felt a chill despite the warm room. None of it made sense. Jason had never mentioned anyone named Eleanor. I folded the paper and placed it back into the envelope. Maybe there was a simple explanation. Maybe it belonged to a neighbor and had been delivered to the wrong address. That would have been the reasonable conclusion. Yet the uneasy feeling remained. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No messages. I tried calling Jason again. Straight to voicemail. This time I left a message. I told him I had arrived safely and was staying nearby. I kept my tone cheerful. I did not mention the sign. I did not mention the envelope. Then I called Amber. Again, no answer. As evening settled outside, I walked across the street to a small diner. The waitress called me sweetheart and refilled my coffee twice. Around me, families laughed over dinner while I picked at a turkey sandwich I barely tasted. Every few minutes I glanced at my phone. Nothing. When I returned to the hotel, the front desk clerk smiled politely and handed me a local visitor brochure. On the cover was a photograph of a lake surrounded by beautiful homes. I almost tossed it into the trash. Then something caught my eye. One of the developments featured in the brochure had a familiar name. Whitmore Estates. My stomach tightened. Whitmore. The same name written on the envelope. I told myself it was probably a coincidence. Texas was a big state. Lots of people shared the same last name. But that night, lying awake in the darkness, I kept replaying everything in my head. The sign, the unanswered calls, the mysterious note, the development called Whitmore Estates. One by one, the pieces seemed to drift closer together, forming the edges of a picture I still could not see. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice kept whispering that my surprise visit had uncovered something far bigger than a honeymoon. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Years of habit had trained me to rise with the sun, even when there was nowhere I needed to be. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I saw the unfamiliar hotel curtains and remembered everything. Texas, Jason, the sign, the envelope, the strange note. I made coffee using the small machine on the counter and sat by the window watching the parking lot slowly fill with cars. The logical part of me kept insisting there was probably a simple explanation. Yet every time I tried to convince myself of that, another question appeared. If everything was normal, why had nobody returned my calls? Around 9 o'clock, I decided sitting in the hotel room would not help. I grabbed my purse and drove to the development featured in the brochure. Whitmore Estates was about 15 minutes away. The entrance was lined with carefully landscaped flower beds and large stone signs. Everything looked expensive. Beautiful homes sat around a small lake that sparkled beneath the morning sun. I drove slowly through the neighborhood, feeling slightly out of place. Robert and I had lived comfortably, but this was another level entirely. As I passed one of the larger homes, I noticed a moving truck parked outside. Workers carried furniture through the front door, while a woman stood nearby holding a clipboard. She appeared to be in her late 60s, with silver hair and a pale blue blouse. Something about her seemed familiar, though I was certain we had never met. I parked near the lake and walked along the sidewalk, trying to clear my head. After a few minutes, I sat on a bench overlooking the water. That was when my phone finally rang. My heart jumped. Jason. I answered immediately. His voice sounded rushed, almost irritated. Mom? What are you doing in Texas? The question caught me off guard. Not because of the words themselves, but because of the tone. There was no excitement, no surprise, no warmth, just tension. I explained that I wanted to visit and thought it would be nice to surprise him. A long silence followed. Then he sighed. You really should have told us first. I stared across the lake. I left messages. Another pause. We have been busy. Busy. That single word seemed to create a wall between us. I asked where he and Amber were. He hesitated before saying they were away for a few days. Nothing more. No details. No invitation to meet when they returned. No apology for missing my calls. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. When it ended, I felt lonelier than I had before he called. I slipped the phone back into my purse and sat quietly. Then I heard a voice beside me. You look like someone carrying a heavy question. I turned and saw the silver-haired woman from earlier. She smiled politely before sitting on the opposite end of the bench. We exchanged small talk at first. The weather, the neighborhood, the lake. Then she introduced herself. I am Eleanor Whitmore. Every muscle in my body seemed to freeze. For a moment I could not speak. The name echoed through my mind. The name from the envelope hidden beneath my son's welcome mat. Eleanor noticed my expression immediately. Her smile faded. "Have we met before?" she asked gently. I looked at her, then at the calm water stretching across the lake. Deep inside, I knew the answer to that question was about to change everything. For a moment, I simply stared at her. Eleanor Whitmore. The name that had followed me from my son's front porch to a quiet bench beside a Texas lake. I felt my pulse quicken, but I forced myself to remain calm. Robert always used to tell me that people revealed more when you listened than when you questioned. So I smiled politely and introduced myself. Eleanor seemed relieved. She had the kind of face that inspired trust, gentle eyes, and a calm manner that reminded me of school teachers from my childhood. We talked for several minutes about ordinary things. Retirement, gardening, the heat. Yet throughout the conversation, I could not stop wondering how her name had ended up inside that mysterious envelope. Finally, she glanced toward the large house where the moving truck had been parked earlier. "It has been a busy week," she said. "I am finally settling everything after a very long process." I asked if she had recently purchased the property. Her expression shifted slightly. "Not exactly. It is a family matter. Complicated, but thankfully almost resolved." Family matter. Complicated. The same words seemed to appear everywhere I turned. Before I could ask another question, her phone rang. She apologized and stepped a few feet away to answer it. I did not mean to listen. I truly did not. But the lake was quiet, and her voice carried across the still air. "Yes, Amber called yesterday," she said. "She said everything was moving according to schedule." My stomach tightened immediately. Amber. My daughter-in-law. The name hit me like a sudden gust of wind. Eleanor continued speaking for another minute before ending the call. When she returned, she seemed unaware of my reaction. I carefully chose my words. "Did you say Amber?" Eleanor smiled. "Yes, Amber Carter. Such a helpful young woman. She has been assisting with several arrangements." I felt as though the ground beneath me had shifted. My daughter-in-law had never mentioned Eleanor. Not once. Yet here was a woman speaking about her, as if they communicated regularly. I tried to keep my voice steady. "You know her well?" Eleanor nodded. "Fairly well. She has been involved for months." Months. The word echoed in my head. Months. While I sat alone in Ohio believing distance and busy schedules explained everything, something else had been happening entirely outside my view. I suddenly remembered holidays that had been canceled at the last minute. Phone calls that ended abruptly. Invitations that never arrived. At the time, each incident seemed harmless on its own. Standing beside that lake, they began forming a pattern. Eleanor checked her watch and apologized. She had another appointment across town. Before leaving, she handed me a business card with her contact information. "If you are visiting for a few days, perhaps we can have lunch before you return home," she said warmly. I thanked her and watched her walk away. Once she disappeared from sight, I remained on the bench for nearly half an hour. The card rested in my hand. "Amber has been involved for months." The sentence repeated itself again and again. Eventually, I returned to my rental car. As I opened the driver's door, my phone vibrated. A new message had arrived. It was from Jason. The text was short. Too short. "Mom, please do not contact anyone about our personal matters. We will explain everything when we get back." I read the message twice. Then a third time. My son did not know about Eleanor. He could not have. I had not told him. Yet somehow he already seemed worried about what I might discover. For the first time since arriving in Texas, I stopped feeling confused. In its place came something else. Determination. Because whatever secret everyone had been protecting, it was becoming clear that I had arrived at exactly the wrong time for them, and exactly the right time for me. The rest of that afternoon passed in a blur of questions. I drove back to the hotel, but instead of going straight to my room, I sat in the lobby near the window. People came and went carrying suitcases and shopping bags. Families checked in. Business travelers checked out. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged. I was the only person sitting still. Jason's message lingered in my thoughts. "Please do not contact anyone about our personal matters." The wording bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Personal matters. Not family matters. Not a misunderstanding. Not a surprise he could explain over dinner. Personal matters. As though there was an entire part of his life that no longer included me. Around 4 o'clock, I finally went upstairs and spread everything across the small desk in my room. Eleanor's business card. The envelope. The note. The local brochure. I looked at them the way Robert used to study paperwork before making a major decision. Slowly, carefully, looking for details. Everyone else ignored. That was when I noticed something I had missed before. At the bottom of Eleanor's business card was the name of a company. Whitmore Family Property Services. The words immediately caught my attention. Property. The same word mentioned in the note hidden beneath Jason's welcome mat. I opened my laptop and searched the company online. The website appeared instantly. It was a small family-owned business specializing in estate transfers, trust management, and property settlements. I clicked through several pages before stopping at a photograph. Eleanor stood beside two business partners at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Behind them was a sign displaying the company logo. Under the photograph was a short article. The company had recently overseen one of the largest private property transfers in the county. My eyes moved to the date. 3 months ago, around the same time Jason and Amber had become noticeably distant. A coincidence, perhaps, yet it did not feel like one anymore. I kept reading. Near the bottom of the article was a list of affiliated consultants who had assisted with the project. One name appeared immediately. Amber Carter. I stared at the screen. Then I read it again. Amber Carter, listed as a project coordinator. My daughter-in-law had never worked in real estate. She had never mentioned consulting. As far as I knew, she worked remotely for a marketing company. My hands became very still. For several seconds, I simply sat there absorbing what I was seeing. Then another memory surfaced. 2 years earlier, during a holiday visit, Amber had casually asked several questions about Robert's estate. At the time, I assumed she was making conversation. She had asked how long probate had taken, whether Robert had owned any land, whether certain documents had been difficult to organize. I remembered answering politely before thinking nothing more about it. Now those questions felt different, deliberate. That evening my phone rang again. This time it was not Jason. It was an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Something told me not to. Mrs. Carter, a man's voice asked. My name is Daniel Brooks. I work with Eleanor Whitmore. My grip tightened on the phone. She mentioned meeting you today. There is something I believe you should know. I felt my heartbeat quicken. Outside my hotel window, the Texas sky was turning orange with sunset. The room suddenly seemed smaller, quieter. What is it? I asked. There was a brief pause before he answered. Mrs. Carter, I do not think you were ever supposed to discover that note. And if you found it at your son's house, then someone has made a very serious mistake. For several seconds I could not speak. I sat at the desk staring at the darkening sky beyond the hotel window while Daniel waited quietly on the other end of the line. Finally, I found my voice. I asked him what he meant. His answer came carefully, as though he had already spent hours deciding how much he should say. He explained that the envelope had been part of a confidential file connected to an ongoing property transfer. It was never supposed to leave the office. According to their records, it should have been delivered directly to Eleanor several days earlier. Instead, somehow, it ended up beneath the welcome mat at my son's house. I told him exactly where I had found it. The silence that followed felt heavy. Then Daniel sighed. That confirms what Eleanor was worried about, he said. Someone has been moving documents without authorization. My pulse quickened. Who? I asked. Another pause. We do not know yet. It was a careful answer, but not a convincing one. The more he spoke, the more I sensed he was holding something back. I asked whether Jason was involved. Daniel immediately said no. The speed of his response surprised me. Your son is not listed anywhere in the records we reviewed, he said. That is part of what makes this situation unusual. Not listed anywhere. The word stayed with me. If Jason was not involved, then why had he become so defensive? Why had Amber been working with Eleanor's company for months without mentioning it? And why had she appeared in connection with every strange detail I had uncovered since arriving in Texas? Daniel eventually ended the call by asking me not to discuss the envelope with anyone until they completed an internal review. I agreed, though I was no longer sure whom I could trust. After hanging up, I sat quietly for a long time. The room felt smaller than before. The pieces of the puzzle were multiplying faster than they were connecting. Around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Amber. Her message was surprisingly cheerful. Hi, Helen. Sorry we missed your calls. We heard you came to Texas. We will be home tomorrow afternoon. Let us have dinner and clear everything up. I read the message twice. Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she apologize for leaving me standing outside their empty house. It felt less like an invitation and more like damage control. I did not reply immediately. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for one more thing. Amber Carter, property consultant. Several results appeared. Most were ordinary. Then I found an archived newsletter from Whitmore Family Property Services. My eyes stopped on a group photograph taken 6 months earlier. There stood Eleanor. Beside her was Daniel. And standing in the front row, smiling directly at the camera, was Amber. The caption identified her as a temporary project coordinator assigned to a major estate transition initiative. Estate transition. My chest tightened. Robert's estate had been finalized years ago. Yet somehow that phrase pulled me back to the questions Amber had asked after his death. The questions about documents, land, transfers, ownership. I closed the laptop and stared into the darkness. For the first time, I considered the possibility that my arrival in Texas had interrupted something already in motion. Something planned long before I ever stepped onto that airplane. And if that was true, then tomorrow's dinner was not going to be a family reunion. It was going to be a conversation that someone desperately wanted to control. The next morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy that makes every hour feel longer than it really is. I woke before sunrise and sat by the hotel window with a cup of coffee, watching the first lights spread across the parking lot. By noon, I still had not heard from Jason. Not a call, not a message, only the dinner invitation from Amber sitting unanswered. On my phone, around 1 o'clock, another message appeared. This time it included the restaurant address. It was an upscale place overlooking the river, nearly 30 minutes from their neighborhood. Again, something about it felt calculated. If they truly wanted a family conversation, why not meet at home? Why choose a public place? I spent most of the afternoon thinking about that question. Then, shortly after 3 o'clock, my phone rang. Eleanor. Her voice sounded unusually serious. She asked whether we could meet before my dinner with Jason and Amber. 20 minutes later, we sat together in a quiet coffee shop near the lake. She placed a thin folder on the table between us. I debated whether to show you this, she admitted. But after everything that has happened, I believe you deserve to know. My heart began to pound. Eleanor opened the folder and removed several documents. At first glance, they looked like ordinary property records. Then I saw a familiar name. Robert Carter. My late husband. I looked up in confusion. Eleanor explained that one of the major estate projects her company had been managing involved land originally connected to several families decades earlier. During a recent review, old records revealed an ownership interest that had never been fully resolved. That interest traced back to Robert's side of the family. I stared at the papers in disbelief. Robert had rarely spoken about extended relatives. As far as I knew, there had never been any valuable property left unresolved. Eleanor nodded as if she expected my reaction. Most people involved did not know about it either, she said. The issue only surfaced after new records were digitized. Then she showed me another page. This one contained recent correspondence. My eyes immediately found Amber's name. Not once, multiple times. Amber had been communicating with the project team for months, requesting updates, asking questions, seeking timelines. I felt a strange mixture of shock and sadness. Not because Amber was involved. By now I almost expected that. What hurt was realizing she had known about something connected to my husband's legacy and never mentioned it. Eleanor reached across the table and gently touched the folder. Helen, there is one more thing. She turned to the final page. According to the notes, if ownership was verified, several beneficiaries could potentially receive compensation from future development agreements connected to the land. The amount was not enormous, but it was significant. Significant enough that most families would discuss it openly. Significant enough that secrets suddenly made more sense. I sat back in my chair and looked out the window. Cars passed by. People walked along the sidewalk. The world continued as normal, while mine seemed to shift again. Everything I had discovered pointed toward the same conclusion. Amber had known far more than she ever admitted. Yet one question remained unanswered. Why had Jason acted so strangely? Was he helping her keep the secret, or was he being kept in the dark as well? As if sensing my thoughts, Eleanor quietly said, "Sometimes the person hiding information is not the same person controlling the situation." Those words stayed with me long after we left the coffee shop. And as I drove toward the restaurant that evening, watching the Texas sunset paint the horizon in shades of gold and orange, I realized I was no longer afraid of the conversation ahead. For the first time since arriving in Texas, I felt prepared to hear whatever truth had been waiting for me at the end of this road. The restaurant was already busy when I arrived. Soft music drifted through the dining room, and the large windows reflected the last traces of sunlight over the river. I was seated at a table near the back. For a few minutes I sat alone, watching families laugh over dinner and couples share quiet conversations. Then I saw Jason and Amber walk through the entrance. Jason looked tired, older somehow. Amber wore a pleasant smile that seemed carefully practiced. When they reached the table, Amber leaned forward and hugged me lightly. Jason offered a quick embrace before taking his seat. For a moment, none of us spoke. Menus were opened. Water was poured. Small talk filled the empty space. It felt less like a family reunion and more like three strangers trying to remember how they were connected. Finally, Amber smiled and folded her hands on the table. Helen, we know this visit has probably been confusing. Probably. Such a small word for everything that had happened. I nodded but said nothing. Amber continued. She explained that they had been overwhelmed with several projects. There had been legal reviews, property discussions, and confidential agreements. She said they planned to explain everything eventually, but wanted to wait until details were finalized. Jason stared at the table while she spoke. That detail bothered me more than her explanation. Every important answer seemed to come from Amber. My son barely said a word. I listened patiently until she finished. Then I reached into my purse and placed Eleanor's business card on the table. The effect was immediate. Amber's smile disappeared. Jason looked confused. You met Eleanor? He asked. I told him about the lake. The envelope. Daniel Brooks. The property records. The room suddenly felt very quiet despite the conversations happening around us. Amber glanced toward Jason before speaking. You were not supposed to find that note. The words escaped before she could stop them. I noticed the regret on her face instantly. Jason slowly turned toward her. What do you mean she was not supposed to find it? For the first time all evening, genuine confusion appeared in his voice. Amber hesitated. Then she looked down at her hands. I realized in that moment that Eleanor had been right. The person hiding information was not necessarily the person controlling the situation. Jason had known pieces of the story. Amber had known much more. What followed was not an argument. It was something sadder. Layers of secrecy began peeling away one at a time. Amber admitted she had been involved with the property review for months. She claimed she wanted to protect everyone from disappointment in case the ownership claims failed. She insisted she had planned to tell me eventually. Yet each explanation raised new questions. Why keep it secret from me? Why keep so much secret from Jason? Why leave me standing outside an empty house without a warning? Jason's expression changed with every answer. The more Amber spoke, the more he seemed to realize how much had happened without his knowledge. By the time dinner arrived, nobody touched the food. Then Jason asked a question that changed everything. How much of this involves my father's estate? Amber looked at him for several seconds before answering. And when she finally spoke, I understood why so many people had worked so hard to keep the truth hidden. Amber lowered her eyes before answering Jason's question. More than I told you, she admitted quietly. The words seemed to drain the color from his face. For several seconds, he simply stared at her. Then she explained everything. Months earlier, during the property review, she learned that Robert's family had retained a legitimate ownership interest connected to the land development project. If the final verification succeeded, the beneficiaries would receive compensation and future royalty payments. At first, she said she kept the information private because the outcome was uncertain. Then she admitted something more painful. She had also worried that once I learned about it, I might make decisions she could not control. The honesty of that statement settled over the table like a heavy fog. Jason leaned back in his chair and looked away. You try to control my mother? He asked. Amber immediately began explaining, saying she only wanted to protect the process, protect the family, protect everyone from disappointment. But the more she spoke, the less convincing it sounded. I listened quietly. Not angry, not shocked anymore. Just tired. Tired of secrets. Tired of discovering how many conversations had taken place without me. Finally, Jason turned toward me. For the first time since I arrived in Texas, he looked directly into my eyes. Mom, I swear I did not know most of this. I believed him. Not because he was my son, but because I could see the confusion and regret written across his face. He had known pieces of the story. Amber had known the rest. And somewhere along the way, our family stopped communicating and started managing one another. The waiter arrived with dinner, but none of us touched our plates. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. By the end, several truths had become clear. The property claim was real. The estate connection was legitimate. The review process was nearly complete. Most importantly, nobody had the right to make decisions about Robert's legacy without including the people most affected by it. When we finally stood to leave, the tension felt different. Not resolved, but exposed. And sometimes the truth must be exposed before anything can heal. Outside the restaurant, the warm evening air carried the scent of the river. Amber apologized. More than once. Some of her words felt sincere. Others felt driven by fear of consequences. I accepted the apology without pretending everything was suddenly fixed. Trust does not return because someone asks for it. Trust returns when actions change. Jason walked me to my car. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he surprised me. "Mom, I have been letting other people manage too much of my life." I smiled sadly. "You are not the first son to make that mistake." He laughed softly, and for the first time all week, the sound felt genuine. Before we parted, he asked if I would stay a few extra days. Not because of paperwork, not because of property, simply because he wanted to spend time together. That meant more to me than any future payment ever could. 2 months later, the property review concluded. The ownership claim was confirmed, and the compensation was distributed fairly among the rightful beneficiaries. But that was not the real ending of the story. The real ending happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon when Jason called just to talk. No agenda, no secrecy, no one filtering the conversation, just a son calling his mother. Looking back now, I sometimes think about that unexpected trip. I boarded a plane believing I was bringing a surprise to my son. Instead, the trip revealed hidden truths, uncomfortable lessons, and a family forced to confront its own mistakes. And in the end, the most valuable thing I recovered was never connected to land, money, or documents. It was the simple understanding that honesty may create difficult conversations, but silence creates far greater distances. In this emotional family drama, an elderly mother flies across the country, hoping to reconnect with her son, only to uncover secrets that leave her questioning everything she believed about trust, loyalty, and family. What begins as a simple visit turns into a journey filled with hidden documents, unanswered questions, and surprising discoveries involving her daughter-in-law. As long-buried truths connected to a family estate begin to surface, the mother must decide whether honesty can repair relationships damaged by secrecy. This touching story explores betrayal, forgiveness, and the importance of open communication through powerful family stories that resonate with viewers of all ages. With unexpected twists, heartfelt moments, and meaningful lessons, these family stories reveal how silence can create distance while truth can bring healing. Fans of emotional family stories will appreciate the suspense, and anyone who enjoys inspiring family stories will find a memorable message within these family stories. Character 1. White American woman, age 68. Silver shoulder-length hair. Blue eyes. Gentle facial features. Front-facing portrait. Wearing an elegant light blue blouse and simple pearl necklace. Realistic photography. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Natural lighting. Character 2. White American woman, age 38. Blonde shoulder-length hair. Green eyes. Attractive, confident facial features. Front-facing portrait. Wearing an elegant cream blouse. Realistic photography. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Natural lighting. Professional appearance. 1. Cinematic family confrontation inside an elegant riverside restaurant in Texas during golden hour. Character 1 is a 68-year-old white American woman with silver shoulder-length hair, wearing a light blue blouse and pearl necklace. She stands beside a dining table holding a thick folder of estate documents against her chest. Her expression is calm but emotionally strong. Character 2 is a 38-year-old white American woman with blonde shoulder-length hair, wearing an elegant cream blouse. She stands across the table with visible tension and uncertainty in her face. Between them stands an adult white male looking shocked and conflicted. Large floor-to-ceiling windows reveal a glowing sunset over the river. Untouched dinner plates and glasses remain on the table. Background guests are softly blurred. Dramatic cinematic lighting. Realistic facial expressions. Emotional family drama atmosphere. High detail photography. Natural skin texture. Shallow depth of field. Realistic restaurant interior. Strong emotional storytelling. No text. No watermark. No poster style. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Ultra-realistic photography. 122. Cinematic legal revelation scene inside a luxury lakeside property office at dusk. Character 1 is a 68-year-old white American woman with silver shoulder-length hair, wearing a light blue blouse and pearl necklace. She is seated at the head of a large wooden conference table with confidential property documents spread before her. Her face shows quiet determination and wisdom. Character 2 is a 38-year-old white American woman with blonde shoulder-length hair, wearing a cream blouse. She stands on the opposite side of the table, showing anxiety and emotional pressure. A silver-haired businesswoman and a professional advisor stand nearby, observing the situation. Massive glass walls reveal a Texas lake under dramatic storm clouds and fading evening light. Stacks of legal files. Property maps. Organized folders. Reflections across polished wood surfaces. Every character displays complex emotions including regret, uncertainty, concern, and realization. High cinematic realism. Luxury office environment. Natural lighting. Professional photography. Extreme detail. Emotional storytelling. No text. No watermark. No poster style. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Ultra-realistic photography. 1, 2, 3. Cinematic emotional resolution beside a peaceful Texas lake on a warm Sunday afternoon. Character 1 is a 68-year-old white American woman with silver shoulder-length hair, wearing a light blue blouse and pearl necklace. She walks confidently along a tree-lined lakeside path beside her adult son. Her expression shows peace, dignity, and emotional healing. Character 2 is a 38-year-old white American woman with blonde shoulder-length hair, wearing an elegant cream blouse. She stands several yards away, watching quietly with a thoughtful and reflective expression. Golden sunlight reflects across calm water. Elegant lakeside homes appear in the distance. Gentle breeze moving through trees. Natural environment filled with warmth and reconciliation. Family bonds rebuilding after difficult truths. Highly emotional cinematic atmosphere. Realistic human expressions. Beautiful natural lighting. Ultra-detailed photography. No text. No watermark. No poster style. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Ultra-realistic photography. 1, 2.